This vehicle was probably one of the most disappointing new tanks that I've seen in the game, and of course it costs an absolute ton to actually purchase. So without further ado, we are looking at the Type 63 introduced about 2 weeks ago as of the upload of this video, and I wanted to give it enough time to try it out at least a decent amount and be able to have a look at it, as we've been super busy recently. But the Type 63 itself is a Japanese heavy vehicle featuring a very unique suspension whereby you can essentially raise the rear end of the vehicle up so you can get increased gun depression. Now this might seem like it is a very good thing for getting increased gun depression, and it is. Well, you can go up to, I believe, somewhere in the region of about 13 or 12 degrees of gun depression when you're using it fully so 12 degrees max depression, which is of course when you're using it with the hydropneumatic suspension, similar to that of what you see with the Swedish medium tanks. However, this one feels a lot worse, and not only because this tank gets significantly lower alpha damage than most heavy tanks in the game at tier 8, but also because as a heavy tank it really does not get any armor. And although the armor model on the turret is actually pretty well angled with very nice frontally angled plates, the actual armor of those plates is pretty thin, meaning that a lot of the high alpha, high penetration tank destroyers will go through the turret of this vehicle with basically no problem, which is not what you want when you're playing up against a lot of tank destroyers that are currently in the game due to Wargaming's operation requiring a ton of people to be playing tank destroyers right now. So probably one of the worst times to release a tank relying on armor against normal vehicles, not tank destroyers. So yeah, not good at all. But of course, that we can't say that for the rest of the video. That is, of course, going to showcase what this tank can do in a match where it isn't just completely full with 20 out of the 30 tanks being tank destroyers. So yeah, anyway, with regards to the rest of its hull armor is absolutely, and I want to reiterate this, absolutely atrocious. If you're coming up against this thing, the hull armor is so bad you will pen the upper plate at angles that are ridiculous and still be able to pen it every single time. You can pen the lower plate so easily because it's also subsequently made of absolute paper, and so yeah, it is a vehicle that literally has about 120 millimeters of effective armor on its hull from the front. So as a heavy tank, it doesn't really play that role, and also as a medium tank with 40 kilometers an hour that is actually relatively slow to get up to top speed, yeah, it's also not particularly a medium tank. So what exactly is this tank? I don't think it knows itself, and I certainly don't know either. It doesn't really suit either playstyle. It's not a heavy, it's not a medium tank, and combine that with very poor damage per minute on this tank, yeah, it just doesn't feel like it really can do anything good, and it certainly doesn't have anything with regards to its armor to make up for that, even if armor worked properly within World of Tanks console. So be aware, this is an auto aim monster. People will pen you every single time when you are using this vehicle if they auto aim you, because the hull armor is so bad, and because the top of the hull armor is within the range of an auto aim, because auto aims will aim for the center of mass of a vehicle, and this one has a pretty low center of mass, so the hull armor is where you are going to be getting hit, which obviously it's armor, you're going to get penned every single time. So yeah, not exactly what I wanted when I was looking at this vehicle. So bit negative with regards to its armor model, but surely it has something worthy of a tank that should be, you know, able to do something. Well, yes, the accuracy when you are stopped, because there's two modes with this vehicle. You have a movement mode and a siege mode. Now this is the same as the Swedish medium tanks, whereby if you move above a set speed you will get the movement mode, and it's same as what you would see with the Polish mediums as well, so the CS63 and the Tektri. So once you go above a top speed, your accuracy will get much worse, so you are less accurate when you're moving about. And similarly, when you go to the siege mode, which is under, I believe, 15 kilometers an hour, something in that region, you will be in the siege mode mechanic, which means that you can aim with increased accuracy, which is 0.26, which is superb for a heavy tank. But of course, it isn't really a heavy tank. So you're having to compete with a lot of mediums that get very good accuracy anyway and don't have to use a siege mode mechanic and will have good accuracy whether they're going at 50 kilometers an hour or whether they're going at 5. It doesn't really make a huge amount of difference, whereas this tank definitely does make a huge difference when you're trying to fire on the move. And yeah, that definitely doesn't work too well in the current meta of World of Tanks, which is RBRT or R1, R2 on PlayStation. But yeah, not ideal at all. So when you combine all of this into a tank on World of Tanks console, doesn't feel great. And that was my experience of trying out the Type 63, the Japanese heavy tank, at least the first of the new Japanese heavy tanks that hopefully we'll actually be able to get in the game, with part of the Japanese tech tree expansion, I guess, is what Wargaming are going to do, since we're waiting on both the Japanese tank destroyers, including the Hori 3, and we're also waiting on the Japanese medium, or I guess heavy tanks as well, alongside some of the other vehicles that are still waiting on from PC. So yeah, these tanks going to be an interesting one, and I think that this is going to be the same for a lot of the vehicles in the tech tree line, which is why I would definitely be looking at maybe these getting slightly buffed. The performance of this thing is pretty lackluster, and although the DPM when you're using the 320 Alpha is okay, it is paled in comparison to a lot of the other vehicles, and this tank certainly feels less flexible, even if it has a very flexible amount of gun depression. And the mode and siege mode mechanic itself within console, it's not particularly that good, and you certainly feel a bit clunky when you're trying to actually use it, making this tank even less desirable than it already is. So with that in mind, let's have a look at what I'm actually talking about in terms of equipment. We are running it with advanced loader, advanced optics, and improved ventilation for boosted DPM and view range. And yeah, I mean, you could run vertical stabilizers, but it's not really the issue of actually having accuracy. It's about the bloom on when you're actually moving normally. So it could be potentially worth it to run vertical stabilizers and drop out the ventilation. So getting rid of the ventilation and putting in the stabilizer just really depends on how you want to try it out. But of course, we ran it with this one. And of course, if you're coming up against this thing, if you want to take it out and you see one of these things, just aim at the hull armor. It's nothing particularly special. And if you can only see the turret of this tank, wait for it to overexpose itself or try and catch a glimpse of the side armor, and you should be golden. You should pen this almost every single time. Or even if you see the side of the turret like this, as you'll see on the screen right now, if it's angled like this, you can pen straight through that frontal flat plate that you would see very well angled from this direction, but not angled at all from this direction. So yeah, that's kind of how you can take these things out, and it really is not a tank that is difficult to take out when you find it in the game. So with that being said, let's jump into the gameplay and see exactly how it plays. So the first game that we have in the Type 63 is looking at Rezeni. Now Rezeni is a map that is okay for the Type 63. There's lots of hills, there's lots of areas where you can find yourself hold down, where you can hide that big hull armor and try and use the turret, albeit yeah, there's lots of angles to be hit from, and that turret is only useful from the front. So there's often times where you'll get penned in the turret, and even the high penetration tier 8 vehicles, things like the Swedish tank destroyers with premium ammunition, will be able to go through the front of the turret as well, through those side cheeks, and of course the mantlet as well. It is a potential weak point because it's not that well rounded and it isn't that thick either. So there's an additional bit if you're watching at this point in the video and you're struggling to pen this thing with some of your tank destroyers. If you're struggling to pen the turret with other vehicles, I suggest that you wait off and hold off until it exposes its hull armor. That's kind of the keys to success when coming up against this thing. With this game, how can we maximize the damage, since at least we can take something away from this video that isn't just that this tank is pretty mediocre and I wouldn't recommend it. as I wouldn't recommend it and purchasing this tank because it is very, very expensive. I think you have to pay about 10 or 11,000 gold for this thing, which yeah, is about £30, and it definitely is not worth trying to tear your hair out playing and paying to be able to do so. But of course, what you see here is we're going to get into this location. It's a nice beginner location that I like to use on Rosaini when I'm playing in a medium or a heavy, and sometimes even tank destroyers. And that's because you get a good kind of overview of how the game's going to go, as well as being able to reposition and relocate throughout the map. And that's kind of one of the key things within the game. If you want to do better and you're trying to learn how you can actually do better, it's primarily about positioning. Once you get your aiming and stuff like that down, yeah, it just becomes where are you in the game and how can you avoid taking damage by positioning in different locations and finding out where opponents typically will go. That is how you can really have some fantastic games. Now, straight off the bat, we have not had a brilliant game by far. We're up to 600 damage, which is 2 shots, and we're 2.5 minutes into the game. And this is probably going to be a common occurrence with this tank because you cannot play it as a traditional heavy. If you're struggling with this vehicle, if you picked it up and you're wondering how do I actually play the Type 63, well, play it like a medium. Do not be a heavy tank when you are playing this tank. It does not work, at least in the traditional sense. You will not bounce around, you will take a lot of damage, and often the heavy tanks you're facing will have more hit points and also be able to deal more damage to you, and sometimes you won't even be able to pen them back, which is not an ideal trade when you're trying to duke it out with other kind of heavies. So yeah, just be aware of that. So in this game, what sort of kind of is happening in this game? What in particular do we have to do? Well, given that there is a lot of people in the back of our base or not really pushing towards anywhere, we cannot push any further than this. This is as far as I would like to go within the game at this moment in time, because the northeastern side of the map are kind of being quite stale. They're not really moving or trying to progress the game at this moment in time. No thanks down to the half the team being tank destroyers, or over half the team being tank destroyers, because hey ho, I love it when Wargaming introduce operations forcing people to play hundreds of games in tank destroyers. Definitely doesn't affect the matchmaker, not whatsoever. So if you're watching this and you're wondering if you were playing at the time of this recording, which I'm sure quite a few of you will have been, will notice that there's a lot of tank destroyers in the matchup. It's because there's a contract for the Shpatuk, the tier 8, the kind of Czechoslovakian tank destroyer. Very, very fun tank. Not a must-have, but it is one I really, really strongly recommend if you've got a bit of time. So, you know, don't stress about getting it, but if you do want it, now is a great time to pick it up for free. And it is a good fun tank. So that's why there is a lot of tank destroyers at the moment. And yeah, I'm definitely thinking Wargaming should have implemented some form of limitation to how many tank destroyers can be in the game. But yeah, they haven't done that so far. So in this game, you can see the northeastern side of the map have slightly moved up. And I do make a misplay in this game, and I'll tell you about it as we go forward, which is whereby maybe we push a little bit too far, and maybe we would have been better playing even more passively than we already are in this game. So you can see our team are kind of pushing forward. They're really taking out a lot of the guys on the northeastern side, so let's go and support them. I'm pretty confident that there is not a whole lot of tanks actually down here. We knew that the M46 Patton had relocated, and we will have to deal with him. He'll probably come and try and get some back-end shots into us if we do get spotted from this location, which is fine. It will, you know, sometimes you have to make these plays if you want to do something within the game, and you're not just kind of sitting around doing the exact same thing for the entire game and then only to be rushed by 5 or 6 tanks when your team end up getting taken out. So we've got to make a play, we've got to do something, even if it means we only get 1 or 2 more shots off, but hopefully not. In this game, obviously, the enemy team have now been spotted, at least the majority of them, and we find ourselves a little Kari, who we put 1 into him. We're just going for kind of tracking shots, and of course there we go, another one. Now he's kind of just locked down, and you can essentially just keep going for the tracks. We want to aim a little bit further back, and there you go, he's out of the game. And now we're on to the Conway. Conway, obviously pretty dangerous tank if you leave it alive, which is brilliant when you only manage to hit the track of it. Fantastic, thank you very much, Wargaming. Then we put one more into him, up to, what, 3.5k damage, 3 enemies taken out. Not a bad game, but our team have kind of thrown themselves away against a lot of these tanks. All they had to do was really crest the ridge and put in a couple of shots, but unfortunately that is not what they have done. And now we are on a one-shot. We were surrounded when we were trying to be the surrounder. So yeah, 3.8k damage done, and it's looking like we are probably only going to get one more. And now I'm confident that we can push this guy because he's only going to really see our turret, and we go for a speculative shot there, not expecting to hit. Yeah, the rounds on this tank pretty slow, nothing really super fast, so be aware of that if you're playing it. And the heat rounds are certainly faster, but only by a minute amount. The Foch is now going to push towards us, and we have no team support. There's absolutely no one. The AMX that was over on the right is probably still going to be there. I know the M46 is going to come from behind me, and we bounce off of the Foch. Of course we do. So hopefully we can get one into someone, please. I want one more, and there you go, one more. Can we get another one? No, because the medium has finally come from behind us. And of course, the TD still sat in the back of the base where they've been the entire game. And yeah, they are on 0 damage with the Kari, and our other tank destroyer, the TS5, is on 200 damage. So a brilliant game by sitting at the back. In fact, they're both on 0 damage. So yeah, sitting back at the back of the map is not the play in the game. So yeah, if you want damage, you have to go and find it. Otherwise, you're going to be in a situation where it's 3 or 4 against you. And no matter how good you are, whether you're the best player in the game or the worst player in the game, you're probably going to get taken out. If they're all on full health and you're on full health, there's pretty much no way you get away with it unless they're absolutely atrocious at the game that you're playing against, or bots. So yeah, with that being said, hopefully that's giving you an indication as to the Type 63, probably one of the most infuriating tanks to play, as it doesn't have anything, and hopefully you've seen that within this game. But otherwise, if you've got any questions, maybe you love seeing the Type 63 and playing the Type 63, be interested to see whether anyone actually does in the comment section down below. But yeah, if you're wondering, is it worth it? No, is the final answer. Hopefully you'll join me back in the next video, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.